Part 7. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mishida De. Chapter 61. Yejing shook his head. He had expected the scene from the moment he spoke. Then Yejing said nothing more. He picked up the two stone swords in his hands and ran down the tree trunk. As Yejing attacked, dozens of sword dancers quickly followed. Although their number seemed small and ridiculous in front of the army of the awakening empire, Yejing did not think that he had no chance of winning. The strength of sword dancers has been proven in countless hunts. Multiple sword dancers cooperated, and they were even enough to kill giant dinosaur creatures. And now their goal is not to wipe out all the human warriors. As long as most of the kerosene tanks are destroyed, it will be victory. The elf lords behind Yejing did not break their promise. At the moment Yejing charged, a large number of cold arrows shot out from the crowns of the giant trees everywhere, covering the kin throwers on the ground. Facing the rain of arrows, the infantry knights snorted coldly. There was no need for anyone to command them. They stood in front of the grenadiers and straightened their chests. They looked at the place where the arrows were coming from with their proud eyes. None of the arrows pierced their armor. The arrows of the elves, which were always effective, were as ridiculous as babies' toys. Outside the forest, Hayukin was riding on a Tyrannosaurus Rex and chatting with Grandma Zuzu. The seemingly hot war situation in the forest did not even bring any tension to the two. I really don't understand why these civilizations think that they can surpass our accumulation of thousands of generations with just 1 month of effort, Hayukin asked in confusion. Grandma Zuzu smiled and shook her head, reaching out to rub Hayukin's hair. Who do you think is more needed than me, Grandma? Hayukin laughed and did not seem to think about this question for long. If the mother-in-law asked who is more respected, my answer is the mother-in-law. But since the mother-in-law asked who is more needed, Hayukin pointed at herself proudly. A war is not just about shouting slogans. 5-digit or even 6-digit soldiers were dispatched, and the supplies needed along the way, the war damage, and the odds and ends were all allocated by her, the material officer. If the material allocation is not good, there will be no unlimited bows and crossbows and kerosene tanks for those gold-eating beasts to consume. If it weren't for her, fighting a random battle would probably give the Lord a headache for a long time. Listening to Hayukin's explanation, Zuzu smiled indifferently. Yeah, we old guys, how can we compare to you young people? Hayukin was suddenly stunned, because at this moment, wasn't she in the state of those new civilizations? They were proud of themselves, so they gradually stopped taking the old guys seriously. Okay, look over there. Zuzu pointed to the front of the line. At that position, Yejing had already led his men to the front of the infantry knight. Ding ding dang dang. The two swords quickly passed through the joints of the infantry knight. This is the skill of the sword dancer to deal with heavy armored soldiers. By attacking the connection parts of the heavy armor with swords, the effect of removing armor can be achieved. Unfortunately, the effect is not significant for the Obsidian Champion Infantry Knight. Those fragile stone swords do not have the ability to pry the obsidian. Therefore, Yejing did not entangle too much. After slashing the infantry knight's breastplate twice, he turned his body to avoid the heavy sword that was slashing. What a strong skill, is that the Lord? Gao Qiang naturally noticed Yejing's figure. In Gao Qiang's eyes, compared with those guys hiding in the tree canopy and shooting cold arrows. Now Yejing and others who are dancing back and forth in the heavy armored troops line appear to be more elegant. But it is only elegant. To Gao Qiang, Yejing's current movements are like dancers in a dance hall. The movements are gorgeous, but they do not make people feel threatened. Although the Obsidian Champion Infantry Knights were not as flexible as Yejing and the sword dancers following him. But their number was close to 10,000. What would it feel like for dozens of light infantrymen to be surrounded by 10,000 heavy infantry knights who could not penetrate their armor? Gao Qiang was too lazy to think about it, nor did he want to try. After dodging the slashes of several infantry knights, Yejing finally approached the side of a pot thrower. Seeing the pot thrower so close, Yejing couldn't help but secretly breathe a sigh of relief. It's good to be close. But dealing with these kerosene cans may become a long-term task calculated by the day. Thinking of this, Yejing chopped the pot throwers in front of him with his double swords. Without the heavy obsidian armor, it would be impossible for the pot throwers to resist the slashes with the robes they wore. However, what Yejing and all the sword dancers didn't expect was that, facing the slashing double swords, the pot throwers not only did not retreat, but also met them head-on. An unlit kerosene can was thrown at Yejing's face, causing his eyes to go black. When he came to his senses again, another huge force came, and one of the two swords in Yejing's hand was gone. Huh! Yejing wiped the kerosene off his face, looked at the only sword left in his hand, and then looked at the other sword that was taken away by the can thrower on the opposite side. This. And he also robbed the weapon? This was the first time that Yejing encountered such a thing. Even though he had the good upbringing of the elves, he almost cursed out loud. Is this the virtue that a warrior should have? Well, the other party was not a warrior. His weapon was taken away from him. Yejing had no intention of fighting and directly got out from the gap between several infantry knights. But when he looked back, he saw that more than half of the sword dancers he brought were dead or injured. Most of them were not killed by infantry knights. Instead, when facing the can throwers, they were killed by the can throwers who took away their weapons with their bare hands. So the advanced close combat proficiency includes taking away the blade with bare hands. Gao Qiang muttered while rubbing his chin. In this situation, it is wishful thinking for the elves to send heavy infantry to break through the defense line of infantry knights. Of course, the premise is that they have heavy infantry. As for the light infantry, as long as they dare to approach the can throwers. A can thrower with advanced melee proficiency will tell them that with the arm strength to throw the oil can, it should be no problem to smash their heads. Perhaps it is the sixth sense of a warrior. Yejing suddenly noticed the eyes on him from a distance, and then turned his head to look back. Hayukin and his group passed the barrier between the main force and the engineering unit. Yejing successfully met Gao Qiang's eyes. That is, the Lord of Humans. Yejing thought subconsciously. Looking at Gao Qiang's completely unarmored appearance, Yejing seemed to realize something. Like other elf lords, is he a pampered guy? Yejing suddenly chuckled. Everyone who is still alive, follow me. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mishida Di. Chapter 62. Yejing's voice was very clear. All the sword dancers who could still move followed Yejing's movements without saying a word. Gao Qiang narrowed his eyes. He found that these lords seemed to always like to play decapitation when they couldn't beat the soldiers. Suddenly, Gao Qiang looked at Yejing's feet and frowned. A thick vine suddenly stretched out, tied Yejing's torso, and pulled him deeper into the forest. What did you do? Yejing screamed, but he was powerless to let the vine loosen at all. At the same time, because of the distance, his shouts were not heard by Gao Qiang. The sword dancers wanted to save Yejing from the vines. But the vines were too tough and retreated too quickly, so those lords had no way to start, and could only watch their lords being captured by unknown beings. Human. Helplessly, the sword dancers could only cast angry eyes on Gao Qiang, who looked innocent. Tianlian could see that Gao Qiang really did nothing just now, so he was not responsible for this. However, the exclamation that soon came from the air once again attracted the attention of the sword dancers. It turned out that at that moment just now, it was not just Yejing. All the elf lords were grabbed by the vines that suddenly appeared and dragged into the depths of the forest. Just when these recruited people were in a dilemma between stopping Gao Qiang and saving the lords, the change happened again. Those trees that were originally normal actually grew old faces. and one by one stood up and threw the elves on their bodies down. Their roots stretched out from the ground, forming wide soles of feet that could be walked. Wait, wait. Some elves who were thrown to the ground did not realize what was happening. The trees stepped down without hesitation, and when they raised their feet again, only the crushed body of the elf archer was left on the spot. Awakening Empire, Gaoqiang. Jingye, who was rushing to the ancient war tree with a large number of oak guards, looked at the internal forum of the elves and sneered. He originally wanted to get rid of Zhuluo and those Tyrannosaurus knights first, and give Gaoqiang a painful blow. Unexpectedly, Zhuluo finally got around and made his plan come to nothing. But this is harmless. Relying on the support of the undead. The oak guards are close to 10,000, and the acorn boys are countless. Counting an ancient war tree that exceeds the upper limit of the combat power of the Stone Age. Jingye has completely despised the little combat power of other lords of the elves. The only requirement he has for those lords now is to live well until the end of this game. As for the all-out war with Gaoqiang, he has completely taken over it alone. Boom. The farce in the forest continues. The awakened tree people don't care about the lives of ordinary elf people at all. As they attacked the obsidian champion infantry knights, the elven soldiers suffered heavy losses. Dozens of sword dancers had left the battlefield, and they didn't know what to do when they saw the chaos. Why is this happening? From any perspective, shouldn't tree people be the natural partners of the elves? Why do these tree people don't care about their lives? Thinking of the lords who were just tied up by the vines, the sword dancer suddenly had a guess. Perhaps, only the lord's life counts. Your sword dancer loyalty -60. Your elite archer loyalty -90. In front of almost every elven lord, the news of the plummeting loyalty of the lords popped up. But now, they can't protect themselves. At this moment, the field engineer who had reported the original report came to Gaoqiang again. Lord, we have built the offensive equipment you requested. Gaoqiang looked in the direction where the engineer pointed. 100 fire dragon cars were built at an incredible speed. These vehicles are not big, and can be easily operated by 2 people at most. Suddenly, Gaoqiang smiled. Let the main force withdraw some people to move the equipment away. Looking at the tree people who kept standing up in the distance, if burning people still made Gaoqiang feel a little uncomfortable, burning trees was not so worrying at all. Rather, Gaoqiang couldn't wait to see those old guys being burned to ashes when facing his Xiao Le combination. Who didn't have a fantasy of setting fire to the mountain during the rebellious period? Facing the tree people who had already attacked head-on, although a small number of infantry knights retreated. But most people were still prepared to fight. A crackling sound rang out. As a long-range attack can thrower, this time he threw the kerosene can into his own camp. As the kerosene was ignited, the entire land was covered with a layer of flames that could not be extinguished. Among them, the armor of the infantry knights was included. Although their size was much smaller than the tree people in front of them. But under the blessing of the raging fire, they should not be the ones to be afraid. As the infantry knights advanced, all the plants that touched their armor were set on fire, and the line of tree people retreated a few steps. With a wide enough throwing space, the can throwers seemed even more unscrupulous. Not only in the direction of the tree man. Even normal trees cannot escape the attack of the fire oil tank. As the fire dragon car was pushed to the front line, the fire surged again. The fire dragon car can spray a 50-meter-long arc of fire, and the fire it brings is completely incomparable to the fire oil tank. Even if a tree man braves the flames and goes forward to destroy the fire dragon car, it will only cause a bigger explosion. The whole forest is burning in the flames. The wailing of the tree man is endless. And the obsidian champion infantry knight walking in the flames is more like a demon walking from the hell of fire to the mortal world. At this moment, the deepest part of the forest. Feeling the rapidly rising temperature, Ye Jing, who was sweating wildly, finally came back to his senses. The dragging of the vines has ended, and he found himself hanging in a place that looks very crowded. This place is like a hollowed-out cave, and a large number of elf lords are hung here by vines, just like cattle and sheep waiting to be slaughtered in the slaughterhouse of humans. Even among them, he saw his sisters. What happened? An elf lord muttered to himself. The hot breath from the outside world made all the elf lords feel uneasy. But now they were tied up by vines, and there was no way to escape even if they wanted to. Half a day later. Gurgle. An elf lord swallowed his saliva. Fire, there is fire. What fire? The other lords looked at it in confusion. But the next moment, their eyes were stunned. There was already a flame burning along the vines, and as the vines were burned, a lot of pungent smells entered the cave. Only then did the elf lord realize that the outside world had become a sea of fire. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 63. Is he going to die? Yejing closed his eyes in despair when he saw the fire gradually enveloping him along the vines. He was not afraid of death. From the moment he grew up from the ancient tree of life, he had already known that there would be such a day for him. During the period of growing up to adulthood, he had been practicing swordsmanship hard and became an outlier among his brothers and sisters. In order to protect his brothers and sisters well when the war started. But he could not figure out why he died so unclearly. The thick smoke from the burning forest enveloped the sky for 3 days and 3 nights. On the way, more fire dragon cars were made on the spot to further expand the fire in the forest. There was a heavy rain during the period, but even so, it could not stop the burning of kerosene. Until most of the plants were burned out, Gao Qiang stepped into the original forest under the protection of the infantry knights around him. This place has completely become a burnt land, with charred tree trunks everywhere, and charcoal with sparks everywhere on the ground. Whether it was the elves, tree people, or even the wild animals that originally lived on this land, all of them turned to ashes in this raging fire. Even the territory of the undead was far more vibrant than the land under Gao Qiang's feet at this moment. It seems that these forest forces can't die anymore. Gao Qiang crushed the charcoal on the ground with his feet. If these tree people were what Grandma Zuzu said had surpassed the upper limit of the world's technology tree. At this level, they didn't seem to be a big deal. At this moment, the ground trembled slightly. Because he was used to it, Gao Qiang heard the sound of the Tyrannosaurus Rex running. Lord! Haiyukin ran towards Gao Qiang with a team of Tyrannosaurus Rex. Gao Qiang wanted to say hello, but subconsciously saw Juluo with injuries behind Haiyukin. Juluo! Chef sister! Gao Qiang and Sha spoke almost at the same time. Suddenly, Gao Qiang frowned, and he saw the scratches on Juluo's body. Also, the number of Tyrannosaurus knights following Juluo seemed to be a little off. The Tyrannosaurus stopped in front of Gao Qiang, and Haiyukin helped Juluo down from the Tyrannosaurus. What happened? Gao Qiang asked bluntly. Sasha looked at the bloody wounds on Juluo's body, and couldn't help showing a look of distress in her eyes. The chef's sister was bullied. Juluo forced a smile. Who in the world can bully our people? She didn't seem to want to make Sasha worry, and wanted to reach out and rub Sasha's hair. But at this moment, she noticed the obsidian armor Sasha was wearing. Juluo put down his raised hand. So, something happened in the territory, right? Because he was focused on avoiding the pursuers just now, Juluo didn't go into the details of why he met Haiyukin and others halfway. Now, if you look closely, the ground under his feet is still warm. In this world, only they can do this. Gao Qiang listened to Juluo's words and rubbed his chin. On the one hand, he was thinking about how to tell Julugo the news that the Stonehenge was destroyed. On the other hand, he heard the word also from Julugo's mouth. Sure enough, something must have happened to Julugo. Before Gao Qiang spoke, Julugo quickly skipped this topic. Her expression quickly calmed down, and she looked at Gao Qiang in front of her. Lord, are others here too? Yes. After knowing this news, Julugo asked directly, can you notify everyone to withdraw the front line from this burning area and organize defense? Believe me, that will be the most terrifying enemy we have ever seen. Julugo closed her eyes gently, recalling the scene she saw when retreating. She had met the ancient war tree once. The ancient war tree is a complete monster. In addition to its slow movement, Julugo could not see any weaknesses from it. At the same time, tens of thousands of oak guards and acorn boys surrounded the monster. I don't know if it was Julugo's illusion. She felt that the speed at which the monster split was even much faster than the speed at which the undead transformed into living beings. Cook sister, be careful, Sasha's exclamation suddenly came. A big sword hit the ground behind Julugo directly. The acorn boy who just drilled out of the ground was smashed by Sasha with the side of the big sword. But soon more acorn boys drilled out of the soil and rushed towards everyone. Gao Qiang was not an exception. In a short period of time, all the patrolling soldiers on the burning ground suffered sudden attacks to varying degrees. Fortunately, the light attacks of the acorn boys could not successfully hurt the infantry knights. As the infantry knights ignited their armor, the sudden offensive was also resolved in an instant. The combat effectiveness is not as good as those old trees in the original forest, Sasha commented. Julugo did not agree with Sasha's point of view this time. She knew that all this was just the beginning. Because it was the information passed back by Julugo, Gao Qiang had almost no hesitation and ordered everyone to withdraw from the burning ground and return to the originally built outpost to garrison. And according to Julugo's meaning, the current outpost is not enough to deal with the war that may happen next. Thousands of engineers worked overtime for several days to make the transformation. This outpost standing outside the birthplace of the elves was overhauled and completely built into a stone fortress. And at the moment when the fortress was completed, Gao Qiang discovered that it had become a recognized wonder building. Burning Fortress, Wonder. Introduction. This seemingly simple stone fortress has thousands of oil pipelines inside, which can transport kerosene to any corner of the fortress wall. Features: kerosene moat, easy to defend and difficult to attack, siege unit nemesis. In fact, in the blueprint of the building interface, this fortress is not the best fortress that Gao Qiang can build. This fortress is extremely small. Although it can barely accommodate tens of thousands of troops, it is already too crowded. But according to Julugo, the enemy is about to arrive. Time is running out, and a larger, stronger, and more solid fortress cannot be built by Gao Qiang in a short time. This thing should be enough. Gao Qiang walked to the wall of the fortress. There are oil drains on the walls around the fortress. As long as the enemy dares to attack, this fortress can discharge kerosene directly into the ditch dug under the city wall, forming a fire curtain. It actually has many disadvantages, the biggest of which is that it wastes oil. The amount of kerosene required to maintain the defense of this fortress is an astronomical figure. But because it is now the Stone Age, all the disadvantages of this fortress are covered by its advantages. Gao Qiang is very confident that no one can successfully capture this fortress before the kerosene is burned out. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 64. In a corner of the burning land close to the undead clan's territory, a heavy rumble is now heard. A large foot of more than 100 square meters, composed of roots and vines, stepped into the burning land. Jingyi stood on the crown of the war-ancient tree, looking grimly at the elf clan's territory, which was once full of vitality but now completely fell into a dead silence. Quiet. Not only is the territory quiet, but even the elf clan's forum is extremely quiet at this moment. The last post in the forum was an elf lord's desperate request for help. No one could save him. Except for Jingyi, he might be the last lord alive in the elf clan at that time. The war ancient tree slowly moved forward step by step. Jingyi felt that his heart was bleeding. It was not because he felt sorry for the death of these brothers and sisters. But all the elf lords died in a battle, and the elf clan almost lost the possibility of winning. According to the characteristics of the request for battle, Jingyi was completely trapped in this broken game. Now he has only one choice, that is, to kill all the lords of the three tribes. Only when the number of all the lords of the other three tribes is reduced to 0, can the elves achieve victory. Otherwise, as long as the letter of challenge continues to work, Jingyi will never be able to leave this game. What a bunch of trash. Jingyi did not hide his dissatisfaction at all. He even asked the oak guards split from the ancient war tree on the elves' side to help his fellow tribesmen. As a result, those so-called fellow tribesmen were killed under his protection. That's all. Just kill everyone. Jingyi's face reappeared with a sick smile. In the war game, each lord represents the weight of a small piece of land. After the war game is over, the lords of the winning side will divide the land weight of the dead lord according to the war contribution. In other words, now as long as all the lords are killed, Jingyi can take all the territories lost by hundreds of planes. In that case, Mother will be happier, right? Here they come. Listening to the report from the sword dancer, Gao Qiang waved his hand casually and let them retreat. Since the construction of the burning fortress, those scattered sword dancers actually took the initiative to surrender to Gao Qiang, which was unexpected for Gao Qiang. According to Gao Qiang, he didn't care about these people. After the death of the Lord, the people naturally became neutral creatures without a master, and no longer maintained an absolute hostile relationship with Gao Qiang. Gao Qiang naturally had no need to kill them all. However, seeing the loyalty of these sword dancers after joining his army, Gao Qiang did not drive them away. Sword Dancer A. Loyalty, 73. The loyalty of these sword dancers is above the passing line, and they don't seem to have any intention of revenge for the Lord. At the same time, the addition of sword dancers temporarily made up for Gao Qiang's lack of scout troops. The speed of elves is faster than that of humans, and coupled with the speed of sword dancers, they can be used as scouts. Just like now. Before Jingye saw the burning fortress, Gao Qiang already knew his position. It was not until Gao Qiang recalled all the soldiers who had been released to the fortress that Jingye realized the appearance of the burning fortress. What the hell is this? Jingye subconsciously stopped the ancient war tree. Looking at the burning fortress blocking the road. It seems very reasonable to have a fortress built with stones in the Stone Age. But Jingye always felt that something was wrong. On the opposite side, Gao Qiang also saw the appearance of the ancient war tree mentioned by Zhu. Its body is twice as tall as the fortress under Gao Qiang's feet. Roughly estimated, it must be at least 50 meters high. Vines and mosses are all over the thick trunk of the ancient war tree, giving people a sense of vitality. But there are also a pair of biological textures similar to eyes on the trunk, which makes people feel weird inexplicably. In addition, the roots of the ancient war tree exude a detectable mysterious atmosphere. As the ancient war tree buried its roots deeply in the soil, it seemed to merge with the land under it. Is it really reasonable for such a monster to appear in the Stone Age? Just when Gao Qiang was observing the ancient war tree, the two eyes suddenly met and looked at each other. Estimation. Gao Qiang subconsciously checked the gap between the lord opposite him and himself. Because Gao Qiang could guess the gap between other ordinary lords and himself on weekdays. So this time, it was the first time that Gao Qiang used the miracle path to bring about the effect. In terms of military, the opponent is as good as us. In terms of technology, the opponent is as humble as an ant compared to us. Gao Qiang narrowed his eyes. Even if the technology is as humble as an ant, even if Gao Qiang has the advantage of the fortress, even if Gao Qiang still has a large number of unreasonable warriors and completely beyond the scope of technology. Are they still equal in military terms? The final strategy brought by the evil Star Zhou is really a bit too abnormal. However, just when Gao Qiang thought of this, the estimated data suddenly jumped. In terms of military, the opponent is slightly inferior to us. Why did it suddenly become slightly inferior? Gao Qiang was puzzled for a moment, and suddenly thought of the type of soldiers he had trained last week. Now that I calculate the time, it seems that it is time to finish the training. Thinking of what he had trained a few days ago, Gao Qiang suddenly smiled at Jing Ye. I thought who was coming, but it turned out to be a traitor. What is he talking about? Jing Ye frowned, as if he didn't understand what Gao Qiang meant. Although he admired Gao Qiang for building a stone fortress out of thin air in a short time. But this is far from enough. Jing Ye thought so, and dust flew behind him. Tens of thousands of oak guards and 1,000,000 acorn boys headed towards the ancient war tree and the center of the burning fortress. Jing Ye even felt that there was no need to use so many troops. As long as the ancient war tree came forward, it could flatten the wall of this small fortress. As for the interface that could estimate the combat effectiveness of the enemy and us that appeared out of thin air a few days ago, it was completely ignored by Jing Ye. Can this small fortress be slightly better than himself? Please don't joke so much. Are we going to fight right away? After confirming that the other party was not as strong as him, Gao Qiang no longer had the desire to chat with Jing Ye. He estimated that he would not lose to Jing Ye, who was a traitor. Jing Ye had no idea how many experts who played with fire gathered in this small fortress. For example, now, facing the fastest charging acorn boys, Gao Qiang asked someone to take out the kerosene catapult he had carefully prepared. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 65. Kerosene Trebuchet. Introduction: throw a large amount of gravel, causing a small amount of bludgeoning damage and igniting a large area. Characteristics: slow, blazing fire. Compared with ordinary trebuchets, this kind of trebuchet has a layer of fire-retardant paint added to the surface, making it difficult to be ignited by flames. Gao Qiang has tried the power of this trebuchet, which can throw hundreds of gravels with kerosene at one time. Although the accuracy is worrying, it is suitable for dealing with relatively weak things like acorn boy. As for the oak guard transformed from an old tree in the distance, Gao Qiang naturally also prepared a surprise for them. A bed crossbow with flaming arrows attached. Whoosh! At this time, the trebuchet and bed crossbow with the longest range had taken the lead in firing. Dense rubble fell into the acorn boys' cluster, and fire instantly shot up into the sky. Faced with these little guys made of wood, the kerosene trebuchet is obviously very effective. On the other side, a thick crossbow arrow hit the oak guard. While piercing the outer layer of hard bark armor of the oak guard, it also directly set the oak guard on fire. These are far from over. Fire dragon chariots were pulled up the city wall one after another. Because their shooting range is only a short 50 meters, they can almost only attack enemies diagonally below the city wall. But the suppressive power given by these flamethrowers is incomparable to the crossbow and trebuchet combined. Even if Acorn Boy breaks through the dragon chariot's front again, there will also be infantry knights with their whole bodies illuminated on fire, and kerosene can throwers waiting for them at the rear. But Acorn Boy is destined to disappoint Gao Qiang. Although these little things couldn't feel any pain at all, they still couldn't get past the fire dragon chariot level. The city wall is clearly right in front of us. But the flames jetting downwards ignited every acorn boy who dared to get close. Gao Qiang looked at Jingyi, who was standing on the ancient war tree with a half smile. This time, although Gao Qiang didn't speak, Jingyi felt that he was really noisy. From Gao Qiang's eyes, he seemed to see two words: that's it. being looked down upon by a mere human being. Jingyi clenched her fists, but then gradually lowered them. The smile returned to his lips. But it's not like he doesn't know how to attack from a distance. The ancient war tree suddenly lifted up a large piece of land in front of it and smashed it towards the burning fortress from a distance. The position it aimed at was obviously where Gao Qiang was standing. Lord! Shasha stood in front of Gao Qiang, but her small body was nothing compared to the huge land thrown by the ancient war tree. Behind her, in addition to Gao Qiang, Zhulo, Haiyukan and other people who had not been trained as warriors were all standing here. Shasha gritted her teeth and looked at the huge piece of land that was like a meteorite and had cast a large shadow. How could it be possible to stop this thing? At the critical moment, several sword dancers suddenly rushed out, picked up everyone and fled towards the other end of the city wall. Boom! Under the huge sound, the city wall where Gao Qiang was standing just now completely collapsed. The land thrown over was also torn apart, and a thick cloud of sand and dust was thrown up, blocking everyone's view. Is everyone okay? Gao Qiang shouted while fanning the dust in front of him with his hands. We're fine. Zhulo forced her eyes open to count the number of people. Suddenly, she was stunned for a moment. Sasha is missing. Before anyone could react, Shasha's voice came from the ruins of the collapsed city wall. I'm fine too. Just now, because the obsidian armor was too heavy, Sword Dancer couldn't hold Shasha at all, so she had no choice but to give up. Fortunately, after everyone was rescued, Shasha hid behind the crenellations of the city wall in time, so she did not directly face the weight of the land. Therefore, the current Shasha's armor is only slightly broken, but she is not seriously injured. Seeing that a throw from the ancient war tree disrupted the defensive position of the burning fortress, Gao Qiang made a prompt decision and directly ordered, light the moat. The moat of the burning fortress was actually a ditch, and kerosene was slowly poured into it from the pipe openings on the city wall to prevent the kerosene from being consumed too quickly. But even so, the kerosene consumed every second is calculated in massive quantities. Now, after Gao Qiang gave the order, a fire oil tank was thrown into the ditch. In just a few minutes, raging fire rose from around the fortress, completely cutting off the Acorn Boys' path forward. If they don't want to be burned to charcoal, the best way is to stop where they are and do nothing. It's just that although the advance route of the Oak Guard and the Acorn Boy is blocked, but the problem of the ancient war tree is still difficult to solve. During this period, the ancient war tree once again lifted a piece of land from the ground and smashed it against a section of the city wall where the fire dragon chariot was deployed. The fire dragon chariot exploded one after another, and half of the city wall collapsed immediately. If the ancient war tree were allowed to throw it down like this without restraint, I am afraid that the burning fortress would be directly destroyed by it from a distance. At this moment, a sharp cry suddenly resounded in the sky. Gao Qiang looked up and saw reinforcements. Wind God Pterosaur. Introduction: with a wingspan of 11 meters and a weight of 500 kilograms, he is the overlord in the sky, feeds on young Tyrannosaurus rex, and is the top hunter in the food chain. It was also during training that Gao Qiang discovered that the Fengshen pterosaur was actually a trainable unit. Therefore, among the 10,000 training quotas, Gao Qiang trained a full 3,000 units of Fengshen pterosaurs. In fact, Gao Qiang doubted whether he could really afford these 3,000 units. The Aeolian pterosaur is no small thing. The amount of food they eat for each meal is an astronomical figure. Even the food stored in the wall of size may not be enough for 3,000 Fengshen pterosaur huo. But while eating more, their fighting power should not be underestimated. Although these trained Fengshen pterosaurs do not carry knights like Tyrannosaurus rex. But there was one characteristic that made Gao Qiang look extremely envious. Airdropping fire oil cans. After training, the Fengshen pterosaur can drop hundreds of fire oil cans at the target location at one time. When he saw this feature, Gao Qiang's first thought was, Bombers from ancient times. But now, the fire oil tanks carried by these newly recruited Fengshen pterosaurs are completely full. Although they do not have the ability to ignite fire oil jars. But luckily there is no shortage of fire here. The Aeolian pterosaur began to drop cans of fire oil from the moat. He directly smashed an oil path out and led the flames to the ancient war tree. Seeing that the overall situation has been decided. Suddenly something strange happened again. Sizzling. A large amount of white mist came out of the ancient war tree, and the raging fire that was constantly burning seemed to have no harm to it. Julago's eyes never left the ancient tree of war from the beginning. Suddenly, she opened her mouth and said, "I understand. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire?" Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 66. Look at the location under the ancient war tree. Julago pointed at the roots of the ancient war tree. You may not feel it clearly, but I have been paying attention to it since the flames started. As the steam rose, the ground where the roots of the tree were located also slowly sank at the same time. So I suspect that the tree is likely to extract groundwater to prevent the flames from rising. In fact, Julago's guess was almost right. Just when the wind god pterosaur threw a large number of kerosene cans at the ancient war tree. The roots of the ancient war tree spread downward and quickly extracted groundwater to the bark. While moistening the bark, a thin layer of water vapor was formed at high temperature, just to isolate the kerosene. But even so, facing such a large-scale attack, it is impossible for it to be unharmed. Julago's voice had just fallen. Some oak guards suddenly withered. And the burned part of the ancient war tree fell off directly, and new parts grew again. Seize the nutrients of other tree people to restore itself. Everyone fell into silence. As the war progressed, the more methods the war ancient tree showed, the more people realized how difficult it was to deal with it. There were only so many methods that could be used in the Stone Age. Even the most unsolvable flames, the war ancient tree has a way to deal with it. It's not that it's impossible to kill it. But then you can only pile up your life. It's true that it's slightly inferior, but the war ancient tree is obviously not powerless when facing the awakening empire. But Gao Qiang thought about it. According to the setting of the war game, this is the ultimate strategy to confront the entire race of the other three tribes. And he is actually just one of the lords of the human race. If Gongxing Zhan didn't choose the power of the stars, the jackals would have built the giant chariot at this moment. Maybe the war ancient tree wouldn't be so rampant. What should I do? While Gao Qiang was thinking, the war ancient tree had already started to attack the sky. Its arms were not enough to catch the Aeolus flying in the sky, so the war ancient tree used the old method. It picked up a piece of soil from the ground and smashed it directly at the Aeolus flying towards it. The Aeolus was stunned by the smash before it could throw down the kerosene tank, and its body fell a distance. Taking advantage of this moment, the hand made of vines reached up and grabbed the Aeolus tightly. Amid the sharp screams of the Aeolus, the war ancient tree buried it alive in its roots. No. Gao Qiang suddenly reacted. Everyone kept mentioning that the war ancient tree was something that exceeded the upper limit of the technology tree. And the awakening empire in his hands was just at the top of the technology tree, with some unique technology at most. In this way, thinking about killing the war ancient tree was not the wisest way. Because there was actually another option. Gao Qiang looked at the sword dancer beside him. Just like what Yejing wanted to do, but didn't do. Decapitation operation. Why bother with the ancient war tree? From the war panel, Gao Qiang saw that the elves who were hostile to him at the moment only had one lord named Jing Yet. As for the other lords, if nothing unexpected happened, they had all been buried in the previous forest fire. In other words, as long as Gao Qiang killed Jing Ye now, the existence of the ancient war tree would have no meaning. Shasha. Gao Qiang stared at Shasha and paused for a moment. In the end, he was still worried about letting Shasha, who had always been with him, to carry out the decapitation operation. So he changed his words and said, "You go count some infantry knights and pot throwers, and then, let them kill the guy on the tree canopy directly." Then Gao Qiang turned his head and looked at dozens of sword dancers. Because Gao Qiang had heavy warriors in his hands, he only played a role in attracting firepower on the tree canopy. The real decapitation operation had to be carried out by these sword dancers and Gao Qiang's pot throwers. The sword dancers did not refuse because the enemy was an elf lord, but instead performed an elf etiquette to Gao Qiang. At the moment when the ancient war tree attacked, they saw that the vines were exactly the same as the vines that kidnapped many elf lords. Therefore, no matter whether the original intention of the vines was to protect or to harm, the sword dancers had reasons to kill Jing Yi. Sword dancer loyalty add 6. Now the loyalty of the sword dancers has reached 80, which is not much different from the newly recruited people of the same tribe. After Gao Qiang's order was passed down, the unit specially trained as a dragon trainer in the fortress released a signal to the wind god pterosaur in the sky. Then all the grenades were thrown, and the wind god pterosaurs without weight on their bodies all flew towards the fortress. Even if they grabbed the infantry knights wearing obsidian heavy armor with their claws, it was as easy as picking up a chicken. As for the sword dancers and grenadiers, the wind god pterosaurs could take away multiple at a time. A large number of wind god pterosaurs stabilized their bodies in the sky after receiving the soldiers, and then dispersed and flew towards the crown of the ancient war tree. Because the huge size of the wind god pterosaur could not hide its figure, Jing Ye knew what Gao Qiang was thinking at the moment. With so many wind god pterosaurs rushing towards him, Jing Yi couldn't just sit there and wait for death. The acorn boys under the ancient war tree had already climbed towards the tree tops. However, because there was still a lot of kerosene that had not been completely burned on the trunk, their climbing process was not smooth. Seeing this scene, the grenadiers caught by the wind god pterosaurs began to accurately build a wall of fire around the ancient war tree to block the support of the oak guards and the acorn boys. As for those wind god pterosaurs that had not yet thrown bombs, they went straight to the place where the most tree people gathered. A large amount of fire began to spread on the land. Ordinary tree people don't have the fire resistance like the ancient war tree. The road to support Jing Yi was cut off. Jing Yi could only watch the foot knight and the sword dancer being thrown onto the treetops by the wind god pterosaurs. The first moment he climbed onto the treetops, the foot knight ignited his armor. Because of the close-range combat, they can destroy the steam protection layer of the war ancient tree and directly attack the body of the war ancient tree. Feeling threatened, the war ancient tree immediately regarded these infantry knights as its primary target. A large number of vines whipped towards the infantry knights, as if trying to extinguish these fire sources. While the infantry knights attracted all the hatred, the sword dancer easily passed through the blockade of the vines and approached Jing Yi's position at a very fast speed. Shoot! At this moment, Jing Yi finally panicked. At this moment, the people who climbed the tree canopy caused little damage to the war ancient tree. But they were obviously coming for him. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Me Shida Di. Chapter 67. Whoosh whoosh. At the same time that Jing Yi gave the order to release arrows, cold arrows were shot out from the lush branches and leaves of the ancient war tree. He arranged for all the people in the territory to protect their own safety in order to prevent the enemy from beheading. Previously, in order to achieve the final strategy faster, Jing Yi had already trained all his subordinates as jungle walkers. That was the unit he could train in the strange object training camp he obtained from the natural disaster. Jungle walker. Characteristics: camouflage, concealment, hidden arrows. Hidden arrows: when the opponent does not have your field of vision, you will have a greater probability of hitting the opponent's weak spot. Without warning, the sword dancer quickly lost a few people. The remaining sword dancers could only hide hastily among the branches and leaves of the tree crown. Both sides are the top troops of the elves. Without knowing the location of the other side, the battle situation fell into a stalemate. Or, do you want to fight alone? The sword dancer held the two swords in his hands and was used to this situation. While the allies were still elven lords, no one had ever fought alongside them. Now of course they don't expect anything. Before the sword dancers could recover from their depressed mood, they heard the dragon tamer's slogan ringing in the sky. That is. The sword dancers looked up sharply. A group of Aeolian pterosaurs flapped their wings and flew over, dropping thousands of fire oil cans where the cold arrows had just been shot. Then the can thrower directly ignited the kerosene underneath him. Thick white steam appeared from where the fire oil was burning, and at the same time there was the scream of the jungle walker. They were already flattered by the company of infantry knights, and now there was bombing support. The sword dancer clenched his swords tightly. This is called fighting. Whoosh! The figure of the sword dancer popped up from the hiding place just now. Because of the current monstrous fire, the jungle walkers have been forced out of their hiding position. The jungle walker who has lost the injurious effect of hidden arrows is no different from an ordinary elf archer. The sword dancers shuttle back and forth between the branches. As long as they can see the jungle walkers, there are ways to avoid their arrows. Amidst screams, the sword dancers quickly swept the battlefield. The jungle walker does not have the advanced melee proficiency of the grenadier, and for the sake of concealment, he does not even wear armor at all. Now if you confront the sword dancer head-on, the only chance is to be massacred by the sword dancer. Looking at the rapidly decreasing number of citizens, Jingyi retreated slowly. It's not that he's afraid. But as long as he is alive, the elves have not failed. As long as there is the ancient tree of war, there is still a chance to make a comeback. Thinking like this, Jingyi has slowly moved to the edge of the canopy. But the next moment, two stone swords pierced Jingyi's chest and dug out Jingyi's heart. Forward. With her last bit of consciousness, Jingyi turned her head with difficulty and looked in disbelief at the sword dancer who had already killed him behind him. All the jungle walkers were killed. Now, it's his turn. The sword dancer dug out Jingyi's heart without hesitation, and then kicked Jingyi down. Upon seeing this, the Aeolus pterosaur carrying the grenadier dived at low altitude and swallowed Shizuo's body in one unceremonious gulp. With Shizuo completely declared dead, the eyes of the ancient war tree gradually closed again. The fire is starting to spread, let's go quickly. The dragon tamer's voice shouted in the sky, beckoning the beheading warriors to retreat. However, the sword dancers looked at the place where Shizuo died with inexplicable emotions. Before they could express their feelings, they were directly caught and evacuated by the Fengshen pterosaur. It seems that the operation went smoothly. The stagnation of the ancient war tree was seen by Gaoqiang. With the blessing of the Fengshen pterosaur, the beheading of Shizuo can be said to be almost easy. At the same time, the announcement of the war game appeared in front of every lord. The elven lords are all wiped out, and the elves in this game have been declared extinct. Another new civilization has fallen at the feet of the awakening empire, who will become the next ant trying to use the mantis as a chariot. The elves are completely wiped out. Seeing this news, the Supreme, who was still in the hinterland of the jackals, couldn't help wiping the non-existent cold sweat on his bones. Well done to the weakling Fitch. If you don't surrender quickly when the opponent is weak, how can you fight if you let them develop? The Supreme then quickly recovered and continued to direct the necropolis to launch an offensive against the jackals. Instead of thinking so much, it is better to end this war game quickly. Congratulations on completing the all-out war against the elves. As a reward, after this game is over, you can choose to take away an item in this game. Calculating your contribution in this total war. Since you have participated in total war, your contribution will be superimposed. Your contribution is 200%, so the item level you can choose is, any. Any item level? Gao Qiang looked at the prompts of the war game. He thought that completing the second total war would allow him to take away 2 items. Unexpectedly, it is still an item, but the contribution has been superimposed to the excess, and the items that can be selected are no longer subject to any restrictions. Shaking his head and closing the war game panel, Gao Qiang was ready to welcome the warriors. The first to come back were the sword dancers and grenadiers. They were the lightest, so they would be slightly faster. After returning to the burning fortress that had collapsed a few pieces, the sword dancer rushed to Gao Qiang first and presented the item in his hand. This is the heart of that lord. Gao Qiang stared at the heart handed over by the sword dancer, his face a little weird. That elf lord, even the heart is black. No, that's not right. Gao Qiang suddenly took the heart from the sword dancer. In the war game panel, the name of this thing is not the heart. Reverse Kabbalah Source v Cruel. This seems to be a prop, and it seems to be a kind of energy. The war game did not give more hints, so Gao Qiang didn't know what this thing was. The only thing that can be sure is, this thing can never belong to the Stone Age, and it may not even come from the war game. Perhaps, this is something that the Elf Lord brought from his own plane? After all, there are countless planes participating in the war game, so it is not surprising to see any weird things. However, just when Gao Qiang was thinking this way, the heart belonging to Jingye suddenly melted in Gao Qiang's hands. Lord! Everyone immediately gathered around and looked at Gao Qiang nervously. Gao Qiang shook his head, indicating that he was fine. It's better to say that he seemed to be strengthened a little. At this moment, Gao Qiang's attribute panel has an additional feature called Reverse Kabbalah Essence. Reverse Kabbalah Essence V. Effect 1, limited to once per game, the existence summoned by you has a chance to obtain the curse effect Cruel, and all attributes are tripled. Effect 2, you will be blessed, and all beings with the same roots as you can sense your location. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 68. Existences of the same origin? Could it be Shasha and Zhuoluo? Or other human lords? Gao Qiang gently closed his eyes and opened them again in an instant. No. The existence of the same origin that he sensed was not in this world at all. In the brief moment of perception just now, Gao Qiang could sense that they were in several different battlefields. At the same time, Gao Qiang sensed only 9 targets. Those beings are likely to be the holders of the reverse Kabbalah source. If Gao Qiang guessed correctly, this so-called blessing is more like a mark. At present, he is like a coordinate, being seen by those 9 beings. Even if he leaves the war game and returns to his main plane, he may not be able to get rid of this situation. Lord, are you really okay? Zhuoluo asked doubtfully. I think you don't seem to be in a good mood. Gao Qiang raised his head and saw the concerned eyes of the people around him. Yes, he actually has nothing to doubt. As for Jingye, killing him is killing him. If Gao Qiang had known that killing him would make him a target, he would have given the same order. Distant water cannot quench nearby fire. No matter what attitude those beings had towards Gao Qiang's seizure of the anti-Kabbalah essence, they could not appear in front of him in an instant. Besides, what Grandma Zuzu said before was right. When they saw us, we also saw them. It is not certain who is the threat. Let's keep the matter of the anti-Kabbalah essence in mind for the time being. Gao Qiang checked his war contribution. After 2 consecutive full-scale wars, Gao Qiang's war contribution has been approaching 900,000. The total of the human race's ranking list is not even a fraction of Gao Qiang's. Even some of the names of the top 100 human lords are gradually disappearing. Wait. Gao Qiang suddenly focused his attention. A few minutes later, the name of another lord at the back of the top 100 on the list was crossed out and replaced by the next one. Obviously, the human race did not participate in any war between the four races, so what is the situation now? Gao Qiang immediately sent a private message to Su Yukai. The information he received was that a civil war had broken out among the human race. Gong Xingjian's use of the power of the stars completely exposed his hypocritical appearance. He clearly had time to remind everyone to take refuge. But it was obvious that he regarded the casualties of the human lords as a necessary means to win. At present, the Shangji alliance has become alienated from the human lords as a whole. And because of his relationship with Gao Qiang, after learning Gao Qiang's identity, Su Yukai took the initiative to announce his withdrawal from the Shangji alliance. Now that the civil war has broken out, Su Yukai is almost naturally elected as the vanguard against the Shangji alliance. Together with the Ji family, who have always been on the same front, they have become the main force against Gong Xingjian. Of course, Su Yukai's move is also to vent Gao Qiang's anger. As for the attitude of the Ji family, it is even simpler. The fourth lady who was favored by the family was almost killed by Gong Xingjian. Now that Gong Xingjian is notorious, they will naturally not give up this opportunity to beat the dog when it is down. After learning the details of the civil war, Gao Qiang glanced at the pterosaurs flying in the sky. Then he silently sent a message. "I'll be there soon." How fast is soon? Su Yukai looked at the message sent by Gao Qiang, smiled, and didn't really take it to heart. After all, in this Stone Age, it would take at least 3 days to rush from the four wars to the current position of the Shangji alliance. And Su Yukai was confident that he could end the battle within 3 days. "General, the surprise attack troops that broke out of the Shangji alliance may have to be dealt with by you again," the lord of the Ji family said respectfully to Su Yukai. The Velociraptor cavalry controlled by Su Yukai is one of the few cavalry units of the human race, and it is also the top batch. Under Su Yukai's Velociraptor cavalry, the most powerful is just an antelope knight. However, the lord is in the position of an elder of the Shangji alliance, and it is impossible for him to come out at this time to fight a positional battle with everyone. Among the lords of the Shangji alliance, there are almost no lords who can fight Su Yukai head-on. In the current situation, the scattered lords have formed a siege on the Shangji alliance's hiding place. Although the Shangji alliance has deployed some simple stone walls, simple chevaux de frise and earth pit traps. But under the numerical advantage of the scattered lords, the Shangji alliance's front line is still retreating step by step to the rear. Okay. Knowing that most of his subordinates, except for the Ji family, are scattered, and there are not many lords with combat power, Su Yukai did not shirk. His sturdy body straddled the Velociraptor, and a skull hammer was held in Su Yukai's hand. Although it looked a little funny because of the height of the Velociraptor. But everyone present would not underestimate Su Yukai's combat power. Bow and arrow support. The people and horses brought by the Ji family have become accustomed to cooperating with Su Yukai during this period of time. Because their infantry could not catch up with the speed of the Velociraptors, they simply gave up most of their infantry forces and specialized in archery. The Ji family specially mobilized resources to train elite archers. They may be slightly inferior to the elves, but they can also be regarded as the top existence among the human race. Under a wave of arrows, the surprise attack troops mentioned by the Ji family lord did not expect that they, who intended to launch a sneak attack, would be caught by the enemy and wounded. Su Yukai even rushed out with a dozen velociraptors and rushed through the crowd unstoppably. Unparalleled general. A lord of the Upper Alliance gritted his teeth and said. Many people did not understand why this guy, who was the deputy leader of the Upper Alliance, led the scattered people to attack the Upper Alliance. The Upper Alliance brought together most of the elites of mankind. Is it really worth making enemies for some mud legs? Just a rat who dares not even say his real name, another lord in charge of the surprise attack said indignantly. Unexpectedly, this sentence attracted Su Yukai's attention. Suyukei shook off the blood on the sledgehammer in his hand and looked at the lord who had just spoken. He actually did not want to kill the human lord. The lords in charge of the surprise attack naturally knew this, otherwise they would never dare to take such a small number of troops to go deep into the rear of the scattered lords. Finally, the lord was stared at by Suyukei and couldn't help asking, "You, what are you looking at me for? Do you really want to know my real name?" Suyukei smiled slightly. "Speak my name and scare you." "You, wait." The human lord who just spoke was panicked. This unparalleled general has never revealed his real name. Now that his real name is revealed, does it mean? Before he could think more, the skull hammer had already smashed down on his head, exploding a ball of blood. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 69. Another one died. Gong Xingjian looked at the contribution list. There was another lord ranked lower among the top 100, and his name was wiped off. Naturally, he knew that the surprise attack on the scattered people outside had ended in failure. But there was no trace of panic on Gong Xingjian's face. Suyukei's rebellion was his tacit approval, and he had already had this idea even when the Ji family took refuge in Suyukei. There are too many human lords surviving in this war game. The natural disaster was disturbed, and the meteorite rain did not kill as many lords as expected. In order to quickly advance the game to the victory stage, these redundant human lords must naturally be dealt with by the Gongxing sword. There is this unparalleled general who serves as the benchmark for the resistance. From time to time, he would send some pawns who were on the list but not important to be killed to increase the confidence of the San people in defeating the Shangji alliance. This civil war would only become more intense. In fact, what the casual people don't know is that the elite will always be the elite. The battle-loss ratio between the Sanren lords and the Shangji alliance has been stretched to a terrifying 10:1. Only one lord from the Shangji alliance could be completely defeated for every 10 Sanren lords defeated. The Sanren lords, who seemed to have a chance of victory, did not have as big an advantage as they imagined. What Gongxing sword wants is that they dare to fight and kill, so that they can deal with the excess number of lords in the game as quickly as possible. As for the true core strength of mankind, it is natural to sit with Gong Xingjian and listen to the battle reports from the outside world with peace of mind. The core strength has not been damaged, and even if foreign races start another war, they will not be able to win over the current human race. The human race has already won. Everything is within Gong Xingjian's plan. Except, high strength. Looking at the far ahead number 1 on the contribution list, Gong Xingjian sighed helplessly. He gave up. I have tried all the possible methods, and now the number 1 position of Gaoqiang has been firmly established, and it is completely impossible to be shaken again. At this moment, Gong Xingjian was even a little afraid that Gaoqiang would come to his door. However, what Gong Xingjian didn't know was, the more afraid of something, the easier it is to encounter something. It only took a few hours of hard work. Suyukei had just finished clearing the last soldier of the surprise attack force when he heard frightened shouts coming from behind. There are dragons, there are flying dragons. Suyukei looked along the direction where the shout came from, and his pupils shrank instantly. 1, 10, hundreds, thousands. Thousands of Fengshen pterosaurs seemed to be grabbing something and flying towards here. Because the distance was too far, Suyukei could only see densely packed small black dots. But the alliance formed by the scattered lords has been frightened and collapsed. They could see the outline from such a distance, and they didn't even dare to think about what kind of monster it would be if they got closer. General, let's find a place to take refuge quickly. The lord of the Ji family hurriedly found Suyukei. Lenjiao has been arranged by them to a safe location, and they also hope that Suyuki will not make unwise decisions. With so many flying dragons sweeping over now, something must have happened. However, looking at the increasingly clear outline, Suyuki's steps that he wanted to move suddenly stopped. Gao Qiang, he hesitated and looked at the figure held by the Fengshen pterosaur. The Aeolus pterosaur flies too fast. It didn't take long for a Fengshen pterosaur flying close to the ground to pass over Suyuki's head. Gao Qiang stretched out his hand and briefly greeted Suyuki. Then he looked towards the position directly in front of Suyuki. Since Suyuki's location is here, the coordinates of the Shangji alliance can be guessed without guessing. Covering strike. Gao Qiang gave an order, and thousands of fire oil cans were smashed from the beginning of the Shangji alliance's front line to the core. Then a lit fire oil can was smashed down. The raging fire lit up every corner of the Shangji alliance. No bow and arrow shot at a height that could threaten the Aeolus pterosaur in the sky. Humanity is far from developed to that point. This is a completely unequal duel. Ahem, ahem. In the thick smoke of the fire, Gong Xingjian coughed violently while rushing out of the meeting hall with more than a dozen elders. He had no idea where the fire that suddenly fell above him came from. The speed of Fengshen pterosaur is too fast. At the moment when the fire was already burning, Gong Xingjian's subordinates did not have time to report the information to Gong Xing Sword's hands. "Leader, what should we do now?" an elder asked in a panic. Cans of fire oil kept falling from the sky, and even the antelope knight he was proud of was burned into a roasted whole sheep. If this continues, all the core strength of the human race in this war game will not be destroyed here. What to do? Gong Xingjian's eyes swept over a dozen elders, seeming to be hesitant about a certain idea. However, at this moment, several rumbling sounds were heard beside everyone. Although Gao Qiang didn't know Gong Xingjian, the conspicuous movements of Gong Xingjian and others still attracted Gao Qiang's attention. Following the elders' shout of alliance, Gao Qiang had already found the target he was looking for. One after another, the Obsidian Champion infantry knights were thrown into the fire. At this moment, they are gathering towards the location of Gong Xing Sword. Most of the people they met on the road were ancient warriors wearing bark aprons and holding simple stone hammers. These guys had no ability to resist the infantry knights wearing heavy armor and covered with flames. Soon, the infantry knights cleared a fire-free area and surrounded Kusiikan. At this moment, Gao Qiang also landed from the sky with Sasha and others. "Are you Kusiikan? Are you Gao Qiang?" The two spoke almost at the same time. Needless to say, the two already knew each other's identity clearly. Looking at Gao Qiang's gradually playful eyes, Kusiikan sighed, "I admit defeat, you set the conditions." "Oh, conditions." Gao Qiang looked at Kusiikan with a little surprise. "I always thought you were a smart person, why do you think I won't kill you when I'm completely crushed?" "Of course I'm a smart person." Kusiikan accepted Gao Qiang's compliment without any embarrassment. "So I'm giving you advice from a smart person's perspective. I'm the only son of the Grand Elder of the Wuji League." Kusiikan said as he took out a compass from his chest. "This Taixuan compass is the product of my Wuji League. Its role in this game is to predict the specific content of the next game event. Similarly, in this game, all the information on the human forum that predicts game events in advance was released by me." Kusiikan explained the function of the compass. Everyone was not even on the same plane, so he could only use props to prove the strength of the forces behind him. Gao Qiang just listened quietly. Until Kusiikan said something. "No matter how strong you are in the game, it's fake. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire?" Author, Mishida Di. Chapter 70. Perhaps you have some chance that will allow you to win a game. But have you ever thought about leaving this game? Gong Xingjian said seductively, "After leaving this game, you cannot quickly establish a huge power in reality based on the accumulation of one game. And as long as you choose to enter the game again, you will be back on the same starting line as when the game started. What really gives you an advantage at the start is always the forces that support you in reality, not how many games you have won. If I guess correctly, you probably don't have any forces that support you in reality, or you live within a certain force, but you are not important at all. Gong Xingjian stared at Gao Qiang, as if he was sure that Gao Qiang would not kill him so quickly. As for why he was so sure of Gao Qiang's identity and status, naturally, it was because of Gao Qiang's immature and ignorant aura that came from a student. The larger the power, the more information they will know about the war game. The higher their status, the more supporters they will have around them. Gao Qiang does not possess these 2 points. If the force you belong to has taught you enough knowledge, you should know that plane travel is not impossible for some slightly higher forces in the human race. So you are going to kill me in reality, Gao Qiang directly interrupted Gong Xingjian's speech. Looking at the Gongxing sword, Gao Qiang's eyes flashed with warmth and anger. Gongxing sword's words are indeed scary. There is a fallen empire protecting him in the game. Without this game, who can protect him? But Gao Qiang doesn't know why Gongxing sword points out this point. This seemed to give Gao Qiang a reason to kill him. So the forces behind you really haven't taught you anything. Gongxing Jian sighed, as if he felt unworthy of himself. He has determined that Gao Qiang's #1 position is entirely due to his good luck. In fact, there is no difference between Gao Qiang and those outsiders who are attacking the Shangji alliance. I have already given up, and there is no need for any more disputes between us. And I said, you can put forward any conditions. Gong Xingjian looked at Gao Qiang and gave several examples. Resources, rare items. Even if Gao Qiang wanted to, Gongxing's sword could have someone take him to the Wuji alliance and enjoy the same training and intelligence resources as members of the alliance. Of course, if Gao Qiang is not prepared to take the Lord route, but wants to enjoy his old age in peace. The Wuji alliance has also mastered a completely controlled 4th-level wargame world, and the Gongxing sword can arrange for Gao Qiang to immediately enjoy his retirement life. Actually, the only dispute between us is simple. I want to be #1, and you are the #1. Gong Xingjian told his purpose very frankly. As the only son of the Supreme Elder of the Wuji Alliance, he constantly uses means to enter the lowest level of war games, just to refresh his territory type. Because the territory type will change when entering a new war game, and this kind of change is intolerable to those who like the known Coxing sword. He needs to permanently fix a strong territorial type. Coincidentally, within this war game, he finally created a territory type that satisfied him, Imperial Kyushu. If there hadn't been a high-strength one, Gongxing sword would have quickly ended this game and left the ranks of low-level battlefields. That's all, I'll just brush it again. Although he feels a little distressed, this is not an intolerable price for Gong Xingjian. Everything that needs to be said has been said. Gong Xingjian looked at Gao Qiang quietly, as if waiting for Gao Qiang to make a decision. He has made all the pros and cons clear. Let yourself go, you don't have the time or need to hate him, because you are destined to go to the high-level battlefield, and at the same time, he will also meet the conditions offered by the high level. Killing himself would be equivalent to standing directly on the opposite side of the Supreme Elder of the Wuji Alliance. The forces behind Gao Qiang might not be able to protect him. Gao Qiang's expression remained unchanged, but his heart was churning. He was not hesitating whether to let go of Kosei sword, but he was surprised by the information about Kosei sword. A lot of the information that Gong Xingjian just mentioned has never been told in class in the past 18 years. Especially information about territory types. According to Gong Xingjian, the type of territory can actually be fixed. And it seems that he has just met the conditions for fixing the territory type. Thinking of my own talent, I was born at the end of the track when others were born at the starting line. Gao Qiang's worries about the Wuji alliance suddenly disappeared a lot. Then, the last question Gao Qiang asked Gong Xingjian. The other human lords should have no interest in you, right? Why are you thinking about killing them when you release the final strategy? For the victory of the human race. After talking so much, Gong Xingjian seemed to have a plan. Perhaps some weak forces will tell you that survival is the prerequisite for everything. But for us, the only purpose after entering the war game is to win. And victory always comes with sacrifice. If sacrificing some useless people can lead to grand strategic victory, I will not hesitate. Yet. Gao Qiang stared at Gong Xingjian. From his expression, Gao Qiang knew that he was not lying. This is what Gong Xingjian had been taught since he was a child. The strong do not deserve mercy, and the weak do not deserve sorrow. But, if Gao Qiang did not obtain the territory of the fallen empire, have he, Su Yukai, and even most of the people from the same plane, the mud legs in the mouths of the elites of the Upper Alliance, become victims of Gong Xingjian? Gao Qiang has made a decision in his heart. Kill him. This is Gong Xingjian's idea. Unless Gao Qiang can maintain his strength forever, he will become a threat to Gao Qiang's life if he falls into weakness for even a moment. Gong Xingjian looked at Gao Qiang with a little strangeness in his eyes. Wuji League, the Gongxing family will not let you go. His tone was very flat, as if he was more disappointed with Gao Qiang's decision than the impending death. However, with Gao Qiang's order, Sasha and the others did not give Ko Xiaiken any more chances to talk nonsense, and directly used the heavy sword to split Ko Xiaiken in half. They did not care who Ko Xiaiken was, and did not care which faction he belonged to. After bathing in Ko Xiaiken's heart blood, the compass Ko Xiaiken had taken out suddenly floated up and smashed hard into Gao Qiang's chest. Then the compass fell to the ground powerlessly, and a new mark appeared on Gao Qiang's panel. It seemed that with this mark, as long as Gao Qiang returned to reality, Wuji League could accurately find Gao Qiang's location.